Lifting Leaders podcast, where we're unleashing leader possibilities to make a better world. I'm Tricia Ryan, and together with Crystal Roberts, we're diving deeper into some of the complexities of the world's most critical challenges and exploring innovative ways of navigating through them.
Through interviews with experts and leaders just like you, we are exploring what it takes to thrive as a leader today and examining new ways of thinking about how to creatively lead into a more equitable, socially responsible, and sustainable future. And the future starts now. Hi, Tricia. How are you doing today?
I am great. Crystal, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
You've had quite a week.
We got stuck in Philadelphia, if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
We did finally find our way home, Philadelphia, to Austin, Texas, to Seattle.
So you went to see the country,
We went to see the country, yes,
good.
about a 14-hour trip. But we made it home safe and sound. Yeah, we're glad to be here.
I'm glad you're back.
And we're really excited for today.
Yes.
We have one of our elite guests coming back.
Yes.
It is a three-peat for Jeff McAuliffe. So welcome, Jeff. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing great. It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me back.
Yeah, so glad you're
Our
here.
pleasure.
So Jeff has been with us before. He was in episode 44 and episode 77. So if people want to go back and check that out, you can. And he was talking with us about what he's learning about the ever-changing area of climate change and what we can do individually and collectively. So if you're inspired by this episode, be sure and go back and check out the other ones. Today we're shifting slightly what we're going to be talking about. We will not only be talking about what Jeff has been seeing and reporting in his newsletter, 52 Weeks a Year, but also about how do we continue to make progress and really about holding hope and thriving this year in the midst of this really challenging time in the world. And as a reminder, we've read this before back in that episode 44 and 77.
And we hope to read it again in the future.
But we're going to read his bio again just so that people know a little bit more about him, especially if you're a new listener. So Jeff McAuliffe is a coach and a consultant with 35 years of experience in leadership development, process improvement, and organizational effectiveness to help leaders achieve breakthrough results. So a kindred spirit to us.
Yes.
His focus is coaching leaders, mentoring change agents, and supporting teams to create dramatic levels of improvement. Over the past 10 years, Jeff has focused his work on leadership, team development, and executive coaching. After spending decades as an internal and external coach and consultant, and clouded in the luxury of obliviousness, he is committed to positive action on issues of equity, social justice, and inclusion. Jeff was also a graduate faculty member at Saybrook University, formerly Leadership Institute of Seattle, for 14 years. When not at work, Jeff enjoys time in the natural world, backpacking and snowshoeing in the Cascades or kayaking on Lake Washington. His current project is publishing a weekly newsletter called 52 Weeks of Earth Day. To inspire those who are alarmed by climate change to move from being a bystander to becoming a change agent, Jeff and his spouse live outside Seattle with 3 grown children scattered about the country. So welcome back again, Jeff, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks again. It's good to be here.
Tricia, anything that you want to say?
I'm just really excited. I think this is a great topic to be talking about right now. And I hope that everybody's listening. And I do hope anybody who is listening and has a perspective they want to share with us after listening today, that they reach out to us on our website.
Yeah. And the other one of the other things that we really love about Jeff is, even though we can talk about really hard things, is that I always feel more hopeful after I read your newsletter, after we have conversations, because it gives us in the end, we come up with some kind of action that we can take. We don't feel that sense of despair that there's nothing we can do.
No.
And I think that's just really an important piece of this today.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
And it's a gift for all of us.
Yeah. So thank you for being on our podcast twice before. And during those times, you shared your story with us. And so what we're going to do is just ask you, what's important for us to know about you now?
Oh, boy. Well, one of the things that I just wanted to share is that thank you for your lovely words about 52 weeks of Earth Day. And this whole exploration and project that I've been doing on this is really essentially a way for me to process my own journey going through a sense of a couple of years back of pretty significant climate despair and just waking up in the morning and just kind of wondering whether all is lost and being very despondent. And I found myself, well, first off, let me just say that I did the first year of 52 weeks was weekly. I mean, I committed, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just do the discipline. And amazingly, I kicked out an issue every week. And then last year was, actually, it was not last year. It was, well, anyway, it doesn't go with the calendar year. But anyway, the second year it moved to more of a bi-weekly, and I was starting to feel like I was getting into things beyond technical problems, like, insulate your home. It's a good thing to do because, you'll save energy. And have you considered driving an EV and things along that line? Good stuff. But then started to get into more things that I would just describe as maybe a bit more philosophical, like how we're sort of beginning to understand, maybe for the first time, as white Westerners, what does indigenous wisdom mean, or what's really behind conspicuous consumption, and why are we so driven to just buy and collect and accumulate and things along that line. So, but I I found myself this fall back in that despondency again. And I actually went a number of months without publishing anything and just trying to sort things out. And there was just a variety of things driving that. There was some death in the family, the election, the sort of the general melancholy of fall that tends to hit me seemed to be particularly amplified this year. So I guess one of the things that I'm glad to be saying is that it just seems as if in the last month or so or 6 weeks, I've kind of come out of that funk and I'm back at it. So it's a bi-weekly now. It's not a weekly, it's a bi-weekly. And I'm committed to getting something out and going bi-weekly. But it really is ultimately based on essentially at a sounding very narcissistic, but it's just like, it's a way for me to process my own stuff.
Yeah.
And so, this recent one about reclaiming agency and, just focus on your brick is the title of the last two newsletters I put out. And it's really about, okay, how am I dealing with and how can I make sense of and focus on the long term here in the midst of what looks like just doom on a climate change front.
Yeah, I have to say, I really enjoyed the last issue. By the way, I like the idea of the brick. I thought the story was really good, and I also like the focus. I remember when I first started reading you, which was quite a while back now. It was a little more technical. It's like, we ran out and got bamboo toilet paper. I mean, we did a lot of stuff.
We did a whole bunch of
we were doing a lot of
that.
things that were it was our part, our whatever part we could play to make a difference, right? Even though it was a small difference. But the more philosophical stuff to me was educational, and it made me think differently and perhaps more deeply than I'd ever thought about climate and our environment. And to me, there's nothing richer than that. I love being in learning mode anyway, but this seemed important. And so I really love the focus and the direction that you're going. It's in not just instructional, it's a different kind of instructional. It's like, it's deeper level thinking. It's developmental, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a partner. And I think when you were saying that you were going through this sort of ebb time, I would say,
Yeah.
where you, in Hudson coaching terms, we'd call that cocooning when it's a time of deep reflection, right? And now you're kind of emerging with a little more energy to actually be sharing your journey. And I think when we read your journey, we don't feel so alone because we know someone else is going through this as well. And I think there's a lot of value in that, even though it is what you personally are going through, we can see ourselves in that. Yeah. So I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that. I think it's courageous. Yeah.
I do too. So what are your thoughts on the most important development in this last year that gives you hope for the future of our planet?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is zooming out. So as I think about our current environment, I've realized that my focus is sort of left the national level, and it's either zooming out to the kind of global level or it's zooming into local. So, there was this old phrase, think global, act local. Does
Yes.
that sound familiar? That was
Yeah.
like a 90s phrase or something, or 80s, along that line. And that seems more potent than ever right now. So what gives me hope is that if you look at just the whole energy transition globally, even though we're a monster player in the sandbox, so to speak, globally we are pretty much at the hockey stick edge of going up that exponential curve for essentially moving out of fossil fuel-based energy systems to renewable energy systems. That kind of gives me hope. There is a great woman who is fabulous to watch. She's got a podcast. Her name is Christiana Figueres, and she's got a podcast called Optimism and Outrage.
Ooh.
But she's got also just an incredible background because she was essentially working for the UN and facilitated the Paris Agreement. So imagine working
Oh,
over
wow.
5 years to try to actually align up to 200 nations on an agreement that everyone said couldn't be done. Now it's shaky, right? The Paris Agreement is
Yeah.
shaky and all that. But she's the woman that did that. Anyway, she gave a talk recently where she essentially said, we've hit the realm globally where the energy transition is not driven by geopolitics, it's driven by economics purely at this point. So even
Yeah.
though, there's going to be lots of different sort of ins and outs politically in different countries around this, that just the economics of it is just going to drive it. So that, what to me was a hopeful,
That's hopeful, yeah.
a hopeful perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I have such mixed feelings about China just in general on any number of ways and fronts. I've visited China and spent a little bit of time in China and Tibet, and essentially I think that from a global perspective, now particularly with the attacks on USAID and drawing out, we are essentially seeding the economic global future, the energy transition, soft power, however you frame it. We're basically handing it over to China. And in some respects, that sounds kind of scary to me because China has, kind of a history that, I'm not quite so sure I'm fully behind. Although the way we're going and whatnot, I mean, one of the things that I do know about China is they get stuff done.
That's true.
And, if you look at the growth of solar and wind and battery and the movement into renewables and EV adoption and everything, they are completely outpacing the world on
Right.
all fronts on that. And so, and they are bringing that to Africa, and their soft power is bringing all that around to different parts of the world. And we're basically saying, sure, go ahead, do it, because we're going to sit here and focus on the 21st century equivalent of the horse and buggy. That's what we're committed to. And so in some respects, I think we're in our crazy, you mentioned cocooning. This is a different kind of cocooning. I think we're in our own little sort of weird cocoon right now in the US. We're moving into it, but that isn't stopping the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a wake-up call for sure. And if people aren't waking up to it, I hope they are going to be waking up to it soon. You know, it worries me that we're sitting on the sidelines and these things are happening and it's in the news and we're seeing that it's happening around us and we're not doing anything about it. Or if we are, it's so quiet. It's subliminal. I don't know what we're doing. You know, I would love to know what we're doing, right? To address some of that.
Well, I'll tell you one of the other things. So that's the zoom out perspective.
Yeah.
What I'm hopeful about on the zoom in perspective is that this is just this one organization that I've just recently become familiarized with. It's called America is All In. And they list themselves as one of the largest coalitions in the nation right now. But it's essentially a coalition of state governments, city governments, organizations, healthcare organizations, nonprofits that are all basically saying we are committed to the Paris Agreement, even though that our nation has pulled out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what we are responsible for, we're going to hold to the goals of the Paris Agreement.
Yeah.
And it's surprising the scope of just in the course of, not a lot of time. They claim that they represent, if you look at all the people members of those various things, that they represent 2/3 of the U.S. population.
That is hopeful.
So I think there's a lot of folks at the local level now. Now, who knows? Maybe I can imagine an executive order coming out tomorrow that says, "You signed up for America is All In, and we're going to cut our federal funding to you." It's like
Yeah.
that's sort of like the games that are being played right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all have choices on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
We could go down so many roads on that one, right? Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's our personal accountability, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So before we jump into that, though, on the flip side of that, so those are the hopeful things, but what are your thoughts on the most important or one development that has happened that gives you the most concern or is the most important to solve at this moment?
Well, of course, broadly, I mean, my concern is just simply where our national government is going right now. And I guess probably what's more concerning a bit to me is, I mean, the government is certainly concerning to me, but what's more concerning to me is just how seemingly a significant portion of our population, at least according to polls, think, yeah, we're finally on the right track. We're doing the right things. That there's, just at least, I don't know how to read those kind of polls. I'm not a poll expert by any means. But I guess what it speaks to me is that just the need for change at some level for so many people was dire enough that this looks like any change has got to be better than what we had, right?
I actually just
And-
recently heard, as far as polls go, maybe we'll pull that out next time. That there are several that just came out that actually show that people are upset. So Gallup, and I can't remember the other two polls they cited.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Probably since all the cuts started happening.
Yes. Yeah. So they just came out yesterday and I think the day before. So people are waking up. They're seeing the impact to themselves or
Yeah.
their neighbors and recognizing, oh, this isn't just about Washington.
Yeah. Right.
I think we are on a positive from my perspective, positive direction where people
Yeah,
are like, this is
right,
not
right.
working. Yeah.
I actually,
Yeah,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I actually question a lot of the polls anyway, because I think about how they come about. I know that I am communicated with all the time by different political action committees and things that want me to answer a poll, right? And so
Right,
I choose to
right.
answer or I choose not to answer, right? And for me,
Right.
these days, I choose not to answer at all. I'm trying to just divest myself a bit from anything that's going to give information. I'm not sure that's such a smart idea, but at the same time, they overload you. You can get a poll a day, and then you wonder where the statistics are coming from, if they've got a target audience that they're going after, and so they're going to get the answers they're looking for. And when you look at those polls and how the answers are set up, I either totally agree or I totally disagree, or the few that are in between make it look like I'm not paying attention. So of course I just don't want to give them that. But I think that's important to remember, when people are thinking about the polls saying something. I do believe that those are valid answers for the people that are answering the poll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, it's interesting because I worked at Boeing for 10 years and was there long enough that they went through a couple of their, planes go through up and down cycles of, lots of orders, little orders. And what that represents when you work at Boeing over 10 years is at least two waves of we're suddenly hiring on, or now we're suddenly laying off 10,000 people or whatever. So I've over the course of a number of decades in the corporate world, Boeing and other places, I've seen those waves where, well, okay, we've got to do layoffs now, and I remember when I was at Boeing, I was working in an internal consulting, a small little department of internal consultants, and I just assumed, that, well, of course, our whole department's just going to be X'd because we were so far from the actual bones of production and the core that they needed to probably get down to that any thinking manager would say, oh, that group, they're just out of here. And what I was surprised, and it seemed to me almost like a dereliction of duty, was that these senior managers would basically just put these edicts out that every area, every department had to cut 10%. Just, it was just like, it's like no analysis, no thought around how do we actually get a budget closer to our real needs versus what might be extra. And so that would just go across as, okay, well, we're just going to cut 10% here and we're going to cut 10% there. And it strikes me that this is a very corporate approach that's happening in the federal government right now, except that they're going into places and saying, okay, we're going to cut 50%, or we're going to cut, or we don't see the value in the Department of Education, so we're going to cut 90%, or something along that line. I guess what I'm concerned about is just that it's not just that there's all sorts of, obviously, lots of people being impacted and lots of very good things that you would expect government to be supporting and doing. But the first wave was all about people on probation, which by definition is your first year of employment. So any sort of seed corn, any sort of next generation of whatever is just being wiped out. And so I guess what I find concerning about that is just simply that the lack of long-term thinking in terms of this work. It feels very corporate. It doesn't feel like it has much of a logic to it beyond some sort of immediate shock and awe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that corporate, I like how you're looking at that. And I worked for an organization, a very large organization, that used to do the same thing every other year. And it was like, it was sort of a ritual, and you knew it. You knew it was coming. And it was one of those things where you justified your existence every other year to make sure that you could keep your job. And it worked very well for them for years. I mean, it was just a model they followed, and it kept them from, they used to call, calling the herd or whatever they wanted to call it in their insensitive way of saying it. But it worked for them, But that's what this feels like too. I agree with that. In fact, I thought that the other day. I was thinking, wow, this is no different from where I used to work, although it is, nobody in the world knew about our department, being cut 10%. But we all know, everybody knows about what's going on in government right now and how they're
yeah.
cutting and they're losing their jobs. I mean, we almost get to hear individuals talk about it at this point, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So you recently wrote an article in 52 Weeks a Year on climate change agency. And you mentioned that Fred Miller's concept of agency has been pivotal in your work. Fred's definition of agency within an organization is ensuring all people of all roles, levels, tenure, and identities have the power, influence, and voice to make the choices and decisions related to their job and the betterment of the organization. So, how do you see agency in the context of climate change activism, particularly when political forces seem to be working against the progress that change agents are striving for?
Yeah, that's an interesting contrast. Fred's work is, of course, very much focused organizationally, and I think the way that I understood what he was describing is, I mean, agency always has an inside out aspect to it, right? I mean, people look and try to hire for folks who have, they'll talk about like a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset.
Right.
The assumption being that a growth mindset is someone who is self-initiating, self-motivating, interested, learning, curious, sort of reaching out, not expecting to be spoon-fed, et cetera. But also, I think in an organizational context, in a lot of what they speak about, agency is also framed around leadership behavior. And it's framed around how do leaders sort of create the environment that is sort of the right blend of clear boundaries around what is sort of the scope of what people work in, but giving folks a lot of autonomy and authority within those boundaries. It's like the opposite of micromanagement, but it's not so unbounded that it's just, I'm sure I've certainly had experiences of working with leaders who basically said, I just need a self-managing team because, I can't provide direction. I'm too busy doing my own thing or something. Very laissez-faire sort of mentor leader.
Yeah.
So I think in that context, agency is both a leadership behavior thing as well as an internally driven. And I think that when we think about climate change, clearly the larger context is sort of like a bad manager, except not quite so consequential maybe in that respect, or at least that much authority. And so I do believe that it is very much of an inside job. It's a job that requires us to have a sense of, first off, just a sense of self-awareness around how am I responding to this current environment, and am I starting the day with a choice, as opposed to starting the day with, oh God, it's just so bad, I'm just gonna be a victim to the world that I'm living in.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's more of a it's more of a personal choice and less of I also need a certain environment to help me be a change agent. And I think in that article that you mentioned, I listed a number of practices that I think help people find that agency and continue to cultivate that sense of personal agency.
Yeah.
And that went into things like contemplative practice. And I know one of the things that I'm learning is that there's a very, very fine line right now between staying connected, like what's going on in the world. I need to be able to at least face it, know it's happening, and not be overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yes.
it's such a fine line. I think I talk about it between staying connected and doom scrolling. It's like, where's the fine line in there where I can still have a sense of agency, and what's the right level of information that I can actually take in and absorb before my circuits start blowing.
That's the key learning, I think, for everyone right now, or everybody I know. It's
Yep.
when is too much too much? Because I've already crossed that line, and how can I pull back? You can't, but how do you gauge it next time? So it's how do I learn to gauge myself so that I stay within the limits that I can handle, right? And within my boundaries, I guess, and not drink in something that is going to overwhelm me. It sort of feels that way.
Right.
I think part of that too is really staying connected and self-aware of what's going on in your body. That's where I notice it first for myself.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can literally feel, the anxiety and the tension starting to grow. And it feels like you can be so sucked in. It's like you're just like almost hooked, right? When you're reading this stuff, it's like, you know what? That stuff is going to be there later if I want to dip back in. But right now, we need to go back to regulating our nervous system. It's just can take you offline so quickly if we're not self-aware.
I agree.
I'm hearing more and more people around me and folks that are like my clients are telling me I'm journaling more than I've ever journaled in my life. I am meditating for the first time and I'm actually doing it, or I am practicing. And it's like, I love that visualization, doing things that are positive for themselves for the first time, or I'm getting out and I'm taking a walk, or all those things that we've been talking about during COVID and we couldn't get people to do, right? And now they're doing it. So
yeah. It's that almost survival mechanism. Yeah. So we're going to talk probably a little bit more about that too. Our next question is, you stress the importance of staying grounded. So here we go, right? And resilient in the face of overwhelming changes. How can climate change agents cultivate a sense of autonomy, authority, and leadership in a world that feels increasingly hostile toward environmental progress? And I think even when I wrote these just this week, but I feel like even since I've written these, it's like it's one piece of a lot of different things that are right now being very critical. So things are woven together, right? It's a system impact. You can't just pull one piece out. But if we were to focus specifically on this climate change aspect, I want to keep that. I want to keep that front and center. I want to not let everything else pull away my attention. How do we keep making progress, keep having resilience, staying grounded in the face of overwhelming challenges?
Right. Well, I do believe, like we mentioned, there's any number of personal practices that people can do. Tricia, you named a bunch of them. Any of those, they all sort of fall under the bucket of contemplative practices, of some way of just getting grounded. And people do that in such a variety of ways that you talked about. And one of the other things is, I do think, and I've been very much actually struggling with this myself around, to what degree am I actually allowing myself to feel the feelings versus am I just simply trying to stuff them?
Yes.
And so one of the things that I think is also helpful is just finding some peeps who have similar, some other folks who have similar concerns. There's any number of groups out there that are either environmental groups, there's support groups, there's a surprising amount of even just places where people can just simply have a climate change support group, right?
That's great.
Call in or be part of a Zoom meeting where folks just have a chance to just, as you mentioned earlier, just realize that you're not alone, that there's a variety of people that have a sense of this and a safe place to be able to express those emotions. But I think that part of being able to build that resilience isn't just an inside out job. It is finding folks to just literally be with. And, Crystal, you mentioned around how it's not just climate change. I think if there's one thing that this current administration is driving in my mind is the intersectionality of so many of these things around, social justice, climate change, any number of different things are really so strung together. One of the things that I've just started doing, and it feels really rejuvenating for me personally is based on my own surprise around just the election results. I came to the conclusion that I've been in my own bubble way too long. I have just been interacting with people that sound and look and share the same views as me so much that when those results came out, I just got this big wake-up call that there's a lot of people who are just in a hurting enough place that they feel like a need for a change. That was the logic. That was the rationale that made sense to me. Anyway, so I've just started volunteering at our local food bank and just doing a shift there. And really, it's simply about being in proximity with a broader range of people
Yeah.
and just trying to understand a broader range of folks' experience. And I've just done 2 shifts. I just started this a couple weeks ago, and it's been. I have found it to be. It's physically challenging. I mean, it's like, I'm 71 years old, and you're picking up crates of fruit and restocking and doing a lot of heavy lifting, literally. It's felt very rewarding to me in a way that is nourishing, actually, just to step outside this bubble and just meet quite a variety of folks in terms of doing this. And so anyway, that's one thing that strikes me is that I think one part of resilience is an intrapersonal thing, something that we can do for ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think resilience also comes out of being in community with people.
I love that what you're doing for others, you're doing for yourself. I mean, it's. I think that's what we all do as humans. We think we're being, more altruistic and doing
Yeah,
for others,
right.
but actually we're
Right.
getting something from it as well. And I think that's. That might be the wisdom, that people need to get out and do something like this. And there's so many places that people could volunteer. I love that you're doing, a food bank. They're so in need right now, right? And there are soup kitchens.
And it will continue to grow.
Yeah.
There's so many people that are being
Yes.
displaced from their jobs,
Right,
and even housing. People being displaced from their housing. So,
Goodwill. I think Goodwill is going to be another one, or any place that is, donates clothes and or you can donate clothes and other items so that people who
Sure.
are without have something, right?
I actually saw this on the news this morning. It was a place where there's a ferry crossing from the United States to Canada, and the local community is getting together, and they were all dressed in red and white, and they had little Canadian flags. This was on the U.S. side, because they feel like their neighbors, essentially across this waterway, are so unhappy with the United States right now and how they're being viewed and the tariffs and all this stuff, that they want people to feel welcome in our country. And so they're just having their own little welcome to the United States party all the time. And they were showing the people coming off the ferry, they were crying. They actually felt so moved by this welcome. And there's just small things that we can do that make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I highlight that a little bit, Crystal? Because
Sure.
I think that I've certainly been seeing a lot about this, but I know that it seems odd, but the whole notion of compassion, love, extending kindness
Yeah.
are kind of radical acts right now.
Yes.
And they are. I think of them as being. I guess I don't want to be Pollyannish enough to say, well, we all just need to love each other and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
And I do believe that just the more that we are not caught in our own sort of either or, they're the bad guys, we're the good guys
Yeah.
kind of stuff. I think that energy just feeds the kind of energy that's what's going wrong in our nation right now.
Yeah.
And so this sense of being able to respond with love, compassion, kindness in the world in general is resistance.
Yeah.
I like what you said, Jeff, and I'm thinking that, for all of the people that are feeling that we're going through a really negative time right now, very challenging time, and something that they're not understanding, one of the benefits is, or some of the benefits are, that people are waking up to that, to compassion and to empathy, to, to reaching out and helping and listening for maybe the first time to people they never would have listened to, being a neighbor, helping out. And I love that. I mean, I hate the reason we had to do that, but I love the fact that, when things are the darkest, sometimes that's when you see these things. And, every world war has seen things like this. So, this is this is a reawakening, or not even reawakening. It is a first time awakening for many, because we have generations now who have never, ever lived in the kind of war that our parents or their parents lived through. So it's very, very interesting in a concerning way for me, but it's comforting, to know that. So acknowledging the emotional toll of activism is crucial. And you talk about the importance of acknowledging feelings like fear, grief, and rage. What do you think is the best way for climate change agents to navigate these emotions while maintaining the productive long-term commitments to their cause?
Well,
much of what we've just been talking about.
I know,
right?
it is.
that's part of what we've been talking about. But I also, it's like, boy, if I had a magic answer for that one, that would be cool. That is certainly. I do believe that actually being with and being able to acknowledge. I think the key here is being able to acknowledge and not stuff the emotions, but not get either like wallowing in them, not to get caught in them. I think that maybe this is where agency and the emotional piece kind of comes together in some fine place there. I'm not quite sure. I feel like I'm navigating that myself personally, almost on a daily basis. Some days today I'm feeling fairly up, and part of that was because I was coming and chat with you folks. And some days I feel like I have to work a bit harder to just or not work so hard and just say, okay, today's the stormy weather today, and just hang with it. And this, as the great line of my mother, and this too shall pass. I think that is certainly one part of the whole emotional piece that I think I've learned a bit through being a meditator for a long time, is that they are like weather patterns. Emotions are like weather patterns, and they fly in and they fly out. They rarely sort of rest in place to stay. If they do rest in place to stay and they're stuck there, then you got a problem, right?
Right. That's right.
So I'm not sure I have any sort of words of wisdom in this beyond just simply it's helpful to find that place to sort of at least honor them and not get caught in them, I guess, is the best way to place it or to say it.
I think the key to that is how to not get caught in it, or how to not, go over that edge for people who don't sometimes see that moment when they've actually touched that, when they've crossed that line, or when, and so it's a whole degree in psychology, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the other thing to remember too, I was trying to remember, we had a similar conversation with another guest, it was a while back, about when you're in hard times, is to actually look for those moments of joy and to not feel guilty about that. It seems like there's so many critical things going on that we should be always focused 100% time on trying to solve that or taking action around that. And sometimes we need a break, and that's okay. Yes. And whatever that is, could be that you're fixing a special meal with your family and just enjoying the time together, or watching a favorite movie, taking a little mental break, So thinking about how do you pepper in these moments of joy and peace, even in the midst of it. And it's okay for us to feel that way, to have those breaks.
Yeah. That's the whole self-care, honoring that self-care piece, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
So as we look to planning 2025, so this is kind of getting down to the kernel. And one of the things that I love, Jeff, about the stuff that you do is like, let's get practical here. What can we do? What would you recommend that our listeners include individual action and a collective action to make a better world? And you've talked about, I know, some of these things in your newsletter, and we'd encourage people to go back and look at some of those past episodes, but just sort of like pulling a few things through for our listeners for their individual action and maybe a collective action. What can they do?
Yeah. Well, on an individual level, there's any number of things that people can do. But one of the things that continues to strike me is that I think that most folks have very little idea of the impact of what our standard American diet is just on the world.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things where, at least until we, get broader breakthroughs and adoption of, like, say, manufactured meats or something like that, driving across the country. So I don't know if you've ever done a road trip like on Highway 80
Yep.
through the heartland, right?
Many times, yeah.
Yeah, so you come down out of the Rockies, you're heading east, and you're going across Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, 5 states. And what do you see? Corn everywhere, just corn and soybeans. And so just a huge, huge amount of land that is all devoted to basically beef. And some other meats as well,
That's
but
true.
mainly beef. So when you look at the carbon footprint of different foods, it ranges, as you imagine, quite dramatically. But beef in particular, beef takes up just so much more resources than even the second closest is lamb, which is half the amount of resources. And then you start getting down into like dairy, and then you get to like pork and chicken, which is like 1/10 the resources of beef, and et cetera. So, I mean, it's a lot to ask people to go vegetarian. I was vegetarian for a number of years when I was much younger, but I do believe that a lot of people could reduce, if not eliminate, beef from their diet. And I think that alone could make such a huge impact because, I mean, if you think about it, for every something like 100 calories of input of grain, you get essentially 1 calorie of beef coming out of that. So that's like the equivalent of buying a loaf of bread about 2 feet long, eating one slice of it and throwing the rest of it out.
That's right.
The other side to this is that if we did not have so much land devoted to just animal feed, particularly beef feed, then there's lots of opportunity for a lot more wild lands or other sorts of things that can actually be a major source of carbon drawdown out of the atmosphere. So it's not only reducing emissions, it's potentially reducing at a certain point, it could be starting to reduce the whole sort of carbon drawdown, if you will. It's also the main reason that the Amazon is disappearing is for beef production.
Oh, wow.
And so
I didn't know
I don't know
that.
how many of your
That's
folks are in
interesting.
other parts of the world, but
Yeah.
but anyway, if there's one thing, I think if there were one just simple change to go in 25, you want to just say, I'd just say stop eating beef.
I remember
Huge difference.
reading this
Yeah.
actually in the 80s, but there was a book that was written, I think, in the 70s, and it was called Diet for a New America. And they had pictures of animals being raised for slaughter. And at that point in my life, I decided I could not eat anything with eyelashes any longer because it just seeing and reading that book changed my life.
Wow.
But it is, it's astonishing how much of our land that we devote to a product that is not that prevalent. I mean, when you think about it, we have all this land that we grow things on, and we're taking up millions and millions of acres. And yes, it is millions of cows, but one cow eats so much, and they pour out the methane. And I mean, there's so many things that are
Yeah,
that are
exactly.
associated with it that are not great for us. And the fact they do other things. I won't go into it. I'll get on a roll here, and you don't want to do that. But I do agree with that. I think that that's just one thing, and there are now so many cool products out there. If people want to have something that looks like a beef patty, they can get it, and it's not. It's a plant-based beef patty, and it tastes pretty good. I don't eat chopped meat, but once in a while I've tried those burgers that are impossible, and they taste pretty good. Actually, I could be a convert to a processed patty. Anyway, our theme for this podcast for this year is Leaders Thrive in 25. And as you know, in the past, we've put you through the Hope Survey, and we've asked you, point blank questions about what one word would you use, right? So the question I'm asking you about thriving in 25 is, what are you doing this year to thrive, and what impact have you seen this make on you and possibly others around you?
Oh boy, I feel like I'm still sorting that one out.
It's only February, right?
Well, and just things are I mean, I just sort of feel like I've been on such a roller coaster since, mid-January, on inauguration and all that. Thriving in 25, one of the things that I mentioned is that I am very keen on just this aspect. So I am more or less retired. I still do some coaching. But I have the privilege and luxury right now to have a lot of discretionary time.
Nice.
And so what works for me is I just want to give that as a caveat, because I think I just remember decades of raising a family, working full time, 50-hour, 60-hour weeks, and it's just like I couldn't even find time to breathe and get exercise, let alone tell people or give some advice on how to thrive in that kind of environment, right? So I recognize that lots of people are not at all in the place, in the privilege really that I'm in now. I think one of the keys to thriving as we go forward is less sort of in the individual, in the person, and more just simply by finding communities wherever those are. And so, for instance, one of the things that I'm really keen on this summer is just getting to know my neighbors more. And my next door neighbor and I had this plan, which we didn't fulfill last summer, but we've committed we're going to do it, and twice over probably this summer, is just do an open barbecue and just really build community with our neighbors, because lo and behold, we're out here in the suburbs, and we know one or two people around us, but we're all basically living in our own little our own little ticky-tacky houses, and we live our lives, but we're really not connected at all.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that given sort of the shift of what's happening at the larger level and whatnot, building community, whether it's physical community, whether it's interest community around climate change or whatever other sort of issue that's important to you, I just think that community is just going to be so important. I think it's just going to be so critical. So I guess that's my shift for this year, is thinking about how do I continue to nurture and build relationships and community. And particularly, this is actually a preview of a future issue, but it's particularly around physical location and place. Like, how do I get more place-based and build more community in terms of where I live?
Yep. Wow. Yeah. I wonder how many of us live in neighborhoods where we don't know everybody in the neighborhood, right? That's an awesome idea.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So what?
Well, it's also an adaptation thing. It's a major. I mean, while FEMA is being cut as we speak, the number of billion-dollar disasters continues to also go up its own, curve, its own exponential curve. And it's kind of like there's no way of avoiding it. It's coming to a theater near you anytime soon.
Yeah.
And so local community is critical in those kind of times.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
say that, it makes me think about the fires in Los Angeles and how probably for the first time, many, many people became friends and neighbors because they've all lost everything, and so it's a moment for them they have that one huge life connection, and they're building their family. I mean, they're building a community, a family that they can now identify with on a different level, but that's important. It's like after an earthquake or after a flood or something, when people do have to come together. We have so much going on right now, though. I mean, this is a reason for the world to come together, I think, on all different levels. So just a thought.
Yeah. So looking forward, Jeff, what are you excited about? What's next for you?
Well, I'm not sure I have a lot of new thoughts on that one at this point. I feel actually quite excited just simply that I've got sort of my writing mojo back, so to speak.
We're excited about that too, Jeff.
Because I was in that sort of kind of a baseline of despondency for a good couple, 2 or 3 months this fall, and really had a tough time pulling out of that. And so what I'm looking forward to is continuing to sort of nurture and build community, to continue writing, to continue this volunteer work that I've started doing. And I actually, this sounds kind of silly. No, probably not, but what I'm looking forward to is that my youngest son has this huge wedding celebration coming up in August.
Oh,
So-
wow.
That's lovely.
Yeah, that'll
so
be fun.
that's happening here in Seattle, and we're literally getting people. He's getting people from all over the world to come to this event. So that's going to be a big headline. Is just helping and supporting him and my daughter-in-law through making that happen. So
That's wonderful. Oh,
they already got sort of legally married, but this is like the official deal. She's from India, and so this is not like the full, sort of Bollywood 5-day blowout. No one could afford that. But it is going to be sort of a multi-day event.
Sounds
It should be
fabulous.
fun.
Yeah.
that's
Definitely
something to
source
look
of
forward
joy.
to. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
Right. So
Nice. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us today, for talking with us about hard things, but also giving us some actionable things that we can try, inspiring us to keep at it, keep moving
Yeah.
forward, both on a personal level and a community level.
I'm feeling a bit more hopeful today after this conversation. That was something I think I really needed. So thank you for that.
Oh, great. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah, I really do have this sense that I guess I just simply want to underline this idea of compassion, kindness, love
Yeah.
as a form of resistance is just a great way to go.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
So agree. Yeah. All right. Until we meet again, Jeff, I'm sure you'll be back on.
We do have a fourth opening for you somewhere.
All right. Take care.
All righty. Good to talk to you all.
Thank you. Oh, that was wonderful. That was like therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. It was an important conversation. And I love that we can bring it back to here are some things that we can do. It doesn't mean that we're
Yes.
going to solve all the ills of the world, but it does give us, as he was talking about, agency, right? It gives us some agency that we can actually do something to make at least our community a little bit better, and then to have that larger perspective. One thing we didn't talk about that maybe we'll talk about next time, but I do think there's a lot that we can do, and we may have talked about this last week, to put pressure on our political leaders to move them in a direction, and definitely for us to make our voices known, not just sitting back and feeling despair, but just be constantly out there pushing, writing letters, sending emails. Yeah.
I love that you said that, and I think we did touch on it, but we didn't get into it a lot. Number one, today I'm really glad that we had Jeff having that conversation with
Yeah.
us. We've had him on before, and the conversation is always, I think, very rich, and I'm grateful that he was able to spend time with us today. But I do also agree that for some people, or for many people, they've never done this. They'll go to the polls and they'll elect somebody, and then they think it's over.
Yeah.
And it isn't, because these people are representing us. And if they're not representing us the way we need them to, or if they're not showing up, or if they're not stepping up when we need them to, then it's on us to hold them accountable for that. And so I am a big believer in, knowing who my congressperson people are and who my senators are. And even I will write to the president if I feel like I need to. I have written to the president many times. I don't know if the president ever read it, but it doesn't matter. I needed to get it out there. So, and not just those federal Congress people, but we have state and local people who are also our representatives, and they take their messages up to the next tier, up to the next tier, and up to the next tier until it gets to the highest level in the country.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important that we don't give up on that. If we give up, then we lose.
Yeah.
If we don't give up, if we continuously make our voices heard by putting out, to your point, emails, voicemails, texts, anything that we can attach ourselves to and show people that we care, this matters to us. And it doesn't just matter to me, it matters to the people around me. So use your voice. Your voice matters.
Yeah. And I think with climate change also, one other thing that we didn't really talk about, but is, and I'm actually starting some work with this, I'm not going to name the organization, but I'm with this really cool organization that is in an industry that you would think that's really about, that's going to hurt our environment. Mm-hmm. But they've done so many things to mitigate that and to make sure that what they're doing is not hurting the environment, and how they support other people who are doing things that support the environment. So thinking about, we talk about supporting small businesses, supporting businesses, putting our money and our paychecks towards organizations that this matters, that they are actually taking action around this, and they are being good to our environment and our communities.
And we're seeing more and more businesses do that.
Yeah.
I think, the heads of these organizations that do not happen to walk the same line that our current political pundits do, right?
Yeah.
These people are making their voices known by changing the way they advertise their brand, or changing their brand, or changing their focus on how they manufacture and do things that are better and safer for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's really a wonderful thing to note, Crystal. I think that, that organization, I'm sure, is just amazing. And if that gets out to the world, I think that can change a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
Right?
And Jeff he did bring up that piece about, and I can't remember the name now of the organization. I think you might have written it down. I have to go back and listen to the episode of all of these individual businesses that are coming together to honor the Paris Agreement.
Yeah,
and so,
it's called America is All In.
Yeah. So find out who are these and how can we support those organizations. That's where we want to be spending our dollars, is supporting those groups. So anyway, and I just wanted to mention one other thing for our listeners. So when we were having our after conversation with Jeff, he also mentioned that another way to take care of ourselves is to get out into our natural environment.
Yes.
And I feel like Trisha and I, we both feel like that's such an important piece. It can be so grounding. It's actually a neurological thing. So get outside, even if it's cold outside, go step out onto your back porch if that's all you can do, and take a few deep breaths.
I'm being very cautious about stepping out onto my porch lately. And I'm sorry, I have to put in a little bit of humor here, because we have our neighborhood. We have 4 houses on our street. And one of our neighbors brought in goats to help get rid of the weeds and things. And we love them. It's Blackberry and Barney Rubble, and we love them, and they love my front porch. So I spend a lot of time sweeping my porch now, because they've decided that
They're decorating it.
Yes, they are, in ways that I would like them not to.
So you not only have deer, you have goats.
Goats.
All right.
Got it.
Okay. So we hope that you have enjoyed this episode. Let's keep the conversation going. If you have questions or comments about the show, you can find us on all our social media channels at lifting_leaders. We have so many exceptional podcast episodes coming up with more fantastic guests like Jeff. So be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. If you know someone who would find this episode inspiring, share it with them. Text them, email them, or take a screenshot and share it on your Instagram. And tag us at lifting_leaders. If you'd like to know more about us, our guests, or the show, please go to our website at liftingleaderspodcast.com. You'll find our show notes there as well. If you're looking for help in developing your leaders or would like a growth opportunity yourself through leader coaching, please contact us through our website at www.liftingleaderspodcast.com. Thank you to Ari Chance Roberts for his technical support of our show. Finally, please take 30 seconds and follow us. It helps you because you never miss an episode, and it helps us because you never miss an episode. To follow us, go to the Lifting Leaders Podcast Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Then just tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you're willing to give us a 5-star rating and review, it actually really matters. Please do that and share the episode with a friend. We'd be so grateful. Thank you, Trisha, for a great episode.
Thank you, Crystal. This was an important one.
Yeah. And many thanks to you, our listeners. We appreciate you. Find ways every day to lift each other up. Have a fantastic week.